Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Recovery Support Services ECHO series. This is a training brought to you by the Center for Substance Use Training and Telementoring CSTAT, a division of the Be Well Institute here at UT Health San Antonio. My name is Andrea, and I will be helping to facilitate this conversation. But a couple of items before we start. This session is being recorded for later distribution, and you may find it later at our Be Well Texas YouTube page. The information that you see on the chat will not appear on the recording, but it is important for us to confirm your attendance to this class. So please continue adding your names, email addresses, and organizations on the chat. If you're joining by phone today, please let us know that you were here and send us an email at cstat@utesca.edu. And of course, if you need captionings for this class, you know that you can always navigate to the bottom part of your Zoom windows and click on the captioning feature. And today we're having Susie Walker presenting our didactics, and after that we'll be opening the floor for your questions, and we'll give a good 3 or 4 minutes to that conversation. And then in the second part of the session, we'll have Christine Humphrey discussing a case with us. Again, we want to hear your perspectives and opinions during that part of the session, so please feel free to unmute yourselves and be part of the conversation. So we're going to start with some introductions from the RSS Hub, starting by Richard. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, good afternoon now. Glad to be here. Richard Hamner with Be Well Texas for the Hub members in person long-term recovery.
Thank you, Richard. Dr. Hernandez, welcome to RSS.
Yes, Hub member, happy to be here. Hanel Hernandez from Puerto Rico, also in long-term recovery.
Thank you. And our case presenter, Christina Humphrey.
Christina Humphrey, and also in long-term recovery.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome to the Recovery Support Services series. And Kim Goback.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kim Goback from South Jersey. I'm also a Hub member and a member in Sustained Recovery Management.
Thank you, Kim. And finally, Susie Walker. Susie, if you're ready, if you could briefly introduce yourself, and then we can start sharing your didactics.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here. I really enjoy the RSS echoes. My name is Susie Walker. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. I'm a former director of a recovery center, and I'm currently the executive director for the Recovery Partners of Vermont, which is a membership organization made up of recovery centers and certified recovery residences in the state of Vermont. And we all collaborate together and share best practices and advocate. And this particular topic has come up in our work recently, and so it's something that is maybe a pet project of mine. So I'm pleased to present to you this afternoon on peer supervision, and with the idea of good peer supervision protects the peer professionals, the participants, and the peer organization itself. So you could go ahead to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is a disclosure that no speakers or members of the planning committee have any relevant financial relationships, and the views and opinions expressed are solely their own opinions. Thank you. The learning objectives for today. It's a little ambitious, so I'll move quickly. Define the supervision framework, explore ways to maintain strong professional boundaries, identify the skills for ethical decision-making, privilege and bias awareness, and cultural competency, identify how cultural competency and privilege may impact services, and integrate self-care plans with supervision to protect peers, participants, and the organization from the impact of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Yes, and I'll just give an overview of today. I was the director of a recovery center for 14 years. And during that time, I attended my first Recovery Coach Academy 15 years ago. In 2010 is when we first started coaching in Vermont. And it's come a long way in those years. And supervision has been a big part of that. We're doing our peer audits right now for the state of Vermont's recovery centers. And supervision, we're moving toward being able to bill under Medicaid. So we're really building up our standards and making our systems more sophisticated. And so what supervision sometimes is like a weekly check-in with your staff. And so it tends to be very focused on self-care, which is important. But what we'll talk about today is that there are layers of the supervisory relationship, and you need to tend to all to ensure fidelity of your programming and good ethical practices and the well-being of the organization, the peers, and the participants. Next slide, please. So the goals. There should be a good collaborative approach to assessing job performance, strengths, and opportunities and training needs. And the organization is responsible for establishing clear organizational guidelines and expectations. Sometimes those are grant or program dictated, such as what we're doing to qualify for Medicaid. Supervisors are responsible for communicating and implementing these guidelines. Next. There are some unique aspects to supervising peers. Peer support services are more likely than clinical services to be delivered in the client's natural environment, and that contributes to the complexity of managing boundaries and ethics in the peer support services. Peer staff do not have the natural boundaries that the walls of an agency provide. Navigating relationships in the community setting can introduce more intricate nuances to client-staff relationships. For instance, how should peer staff respond when the people they support attend the same AA meetings they attend, or when someone they are supporting invites them to a social event? The peer relationship is quite different. While traditional helping professions emphasize demarking hierarchical boundaries and maintaining detachment, peer-based services rely on that reciprocity, collaboration, and minimizing the social distance between the helpers and those being helped. Next. And of course, in the same way that our peers and our coaches and whatever we're calling our wonderful peer recovery workers out in the field, in the same way that they're trauma informed in serving the people that they support, supervisors, of course, need to bear in mind the same trauma-informed ideas. So you want to establish physical and emotional safety. You want to build trust. You want to recognize the signs and symptoms as you're caring for and supporting your team. You want to promote patient-centered, evidence-based care, ensure collaboration by bringing everyone into the treatment process, which in this case is the supervisory process, and provide care that is sensitive to the person's racial, ethnic, and cultural background and gender identity. Next, please. And here are some skills that a peer supervisor, skills and capacities that these set you up for success. So fully understand and embrace and celebrate and promote the unique role of peer staff and how that staff will integrate into the service team. Support the peer staff in navigating self-disclosure, boundaries, and ethical dilemmas. Promote a supportive, safe, and creative environment that involves opportunities to challenge processes and question and reflect. provide constructive feedback regularly, not only annually, prioritize workplace wellness and self-care. So this is your whole environment in the community within your organization. Collaboratively identify strengths, accomplishments, areas for growth, et cetera, training needs. That's something that you do together as a team. Focus on developing relevant skills to meet the daily demands and to prioritize the needs, satisfaction, preferences of the people served, and support the peer staff in developing the skills that they need to understand and complete the relevant documentation, which becomes more demanding when depending on grant programs or things like Medicaid funding. And of course, model mutual respect. It's a core of all recovery work. Here are some common concerns that peer staff supervisors should be aware of. Peers report feeling isolated and experiencing difficulty integrating into the service team. That's when you're collaborating with partners, but also sometimes within your own organization. Clinical staff might distrust or feel threatened by peers. Peers drift toward professionalism or performing traditional service roles. And we as peers and with supervisory help need to avoid peer role drift, where you start to get beyond the bounds of what recovery workers do. There may be a lack of career advancement opportunities because it's a relatively new field and programs are still being developed, and you may end up creating a training program or finding one that suits you. The roles of volunteers and paid providers are not clearly differentiated. Not all staff support multiple pathways to recovery and well-being. And, that's important in the work that we do when we want to meet everyone where they are. Let's see, the roles might be unclear to clinical staff, partners, peer staff, everyone involved. The training might be inadequate, and peers experience time management challenges. We often have people becoming peers in recovery who have very different professional backgrounds. And so there's sometimes some additional training beyond the recovery specific training that needs to happen. So let's talk about defining the supervision framework. Next slide, please. There are 3 types of supervision. And I think I mentioned earlier that as we're going through our audit process right now in Vermont, we see that there's a lot of attention given to the self-care of the peer support worker. And that's really important, but there are several layers of supervision. And so you want that supportive environment that's about the morale and the satisfaction of your peer worker. The educative supervision for, workforce development, professional development, career growth, and the administrative piece that helps the recovery support professional follow the policies and procedures and perform effectively. The supervision ensures consistency of recovery support services and adherence to policy, which is important for our participants who are coming to our programs. They want to see consistency. The supervision monitors and supports the recovery support professionals' wellness and job satisfaction. And there's a balance to all of these. These are all going to come into play in different areas. The supervisory structures, there are different ways to approach supervision. There's group supervision that, unlike one-on-one sessions, it provides opportunities for sharing experiences and knowledge in role-playing situations and responses. And so you might do with your peer team or your coaching team, you might have everyone come together. And we used to do ethics and boundaries boot camps all the time because there were always issues coming up. Peer supervision, that you might have an experienced peer staff person who will help in the supervisory process of new peer staff with mentoring and shadowing. And these more experienced peers may benefit from additional managerial training as well. And that's something that as a supervisor, you can watch out for those needs and those opportunities. Co-supervision is an interesting way so that your staff are hearing consistent but kind of different points of view about approaching the work. It's based on the idea that groups of people have more insight to offer than one person does. And no formal supervisor is involved in this model. The peer staff work as a group to discover, address, and follow up on professional strengths and challenges. Next. And now we'll talk about defining ethics in the context of recovery support services. The ethical guidelines, I'm sure y'all are familiar with, for recovery support professionals. They're voluntary, hopeful, open-minded, empathetic, respectful, all these wonderful things, strength-based, transparent, and person-driven. We always want to keep those things in mind as we're doing our work and as we're supporting our teams. So how do you make ethical decisions and how do you maintain boundaries? Here are some ideas for that. Ethical decision-making involves these 4 areas. Iatrogenic, which are the actions taken even with best intentions that might harm or cause injury to someone. Fiduciary is that relationship when one party has a special duty or obligation to the other party. Boundary management, those are the decisions that determine the level of intimacy and parameters in a relationship, and avoiding dual relationships, for instance. Multi-party vulnerability conveys how multiple parties can be affected by what a recovery support professional does or doesn't do in our very rich collaborative environment, because we all collaborate so well with doctors and police and first responders, that what we do as recovery support professionals might impact somebody else's work or relationship with the people we're supporting. So we need to be very mindful and careful of that. Iatrogenic, this means unintended harm. For instance, in the 1940s, recommending a lobotomy was considered treatment and not a harmful procedure. A peer service example might be that a peer recommends 12-step programs is the only way to sustain recovery because it worked for them. But we know from our work and from research that there are many paths of recovery, and we want to support whatever. If somebody's succeeding with a certain path, I want to know more about it so I can share that good news with others. The action we take when we have, or we believe we have, caused harm, it's important to identify the cause and avoid this harm in the future. And again, that's where supervision can play such an important role, whether it's one-on-one with your supervisor or whether it's in a team supervision environment where it's kind of a case review. You can look at those things and you can talk through it, and you can identify a different choice you would make in the future. Next slide. Fiduciary, when one person has a special duty or obligation for another. We're designated people for others to approach for help, for instance, as peer specialists, and we have different roles. A breach example is a peer is going through a divorce and goes into a lengthy discussion with a peer about how marriage is a joke. And so you're getting into more of a personal conversation than staying in your professional role. And I know that as peer professionals, I see this often in our work, is especially with newer peer workers, that being a peer and a professional, it takes a while to really get a handle on what that means. And we have that shared experience and we identify with each other, but in your role as a professional, it's important to stay in that role, and your supervisor can help you in that area. And the important action to take is to maintain an open dialogue with your supervisor, and really to more than check in about how are things going and 15 minutes later. I know it's because people want to get out and be helping people one-on-one, but sometimes we shortchange that supervisory time. So if you can really allow yourself the time with your supervisor and talk about things and bring up, I wonder about, or can I ask you about this? Really use your supervisor. Next, please. Boundary management. This encompasses the decisions that increase or decrease the intimacy in a relationship. your home organization will have specific boundaries that you need to uphold while working for them. A breach example is the organization does not allow for sharing cigarettes with those you serve. The peer does not agree and thinks smoking with participants is a way to bond, so regularly smokes with participants outside the facility. And that gets into that we each have our own set of values, and your organization has values and a code of conduct. A code of conduct. And you need to be sure as an employee that you're in alignment with your organization's values and goals. Next, please. And this is just a chart that you can look at in more detail later, but it describes what are some rigid boundaries that might prevent a really full relationship in the recovery service area, and some more porous boundaries which have other difficulties associated with them, and then some examples of healthy boundaries. So it's not oversharing, and it's not just being so closed off that there's not real interaction happening. It's valuing your own opinion and staying in your lane. We say that a lot. Yeah, next, please. So some ways to make ethical decisions include steps like these. Consider who is vulnerable to harm and what is the potential degree of harm and what could go wrong. To really think about these things. Step 2, what core recovery values apply to this situation and what action do they suggest? To really give some thought to what a recommendation you might be considering, or a discussion you're about to have. Step 3, what laws, standards, or historical practices might guide our conduct in this situation? These are all areas where you can see that a supervisory discussion can really help. And step 4, where risk of injury is great to multiple parties, document what you considered, who you consulted, and what you decided and did. In other words, the outcome of your decisions and actions. And again, that's something that both yourself and the team can learn from as you move ahead, is that you're learning from your own experiences and you're sharing your wisdom with your colleagues. Next, please. So some best practices for ethical decision making. Always prioritize peer autonomy. Empower, don't dictate. The person in recovery is defining their path, and we are supporting their path. Seek supervision and consultation. I made this one bold because that's why we're here today. We're talking about ethics and boundaries in the context of that supervisory relationship. Never make difficult ethical decisions alone. Follow confidentiality guidelines, but recognize when safety takes priority. That's an area, especially newer peers might need some supervisory guidance on. I've seen many peers who just feel like they don't want to break a confidence of what someone has told them. And yet, if you ever had any inkling that some harm might happen, that's when you can confide in your supervisor. And your organization should have some guidelines about the situations when you are required to consult your supervisor. Maintain professional boundaries, even in complex peer relationships. I live in Vermont, and I live in a very small town, and people know each other in recovery and before recovery, and it can be complicated. And yet I've seen some very successful professional peers maintain those boundaries and know how to be clear that I'm talking to you right now as a coach, and these are my responsibilities to you. And then continue ethical learning, engage in ongoing training and professional development, because this is an ongoing, we're learning all the time. The peer recovery field is still evolving in exciting ways in new areas where we have peers in emergency departments, probation and parole departments, working along in corrections and post corrections. And all of those different assignments, if you will, come with they might have different requirements in each area. And so the supervisor can help you there as well. Next, please. privilege and cultural matters. This is an area where you want to be sure as a peer that you are really mindful of, we can go ahead there on the slide, mindful of the fact that people with different backgrounds might have different traditions, practices, values. We don't want to assume that everyone thinks the way we do. So privilege is that special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group, often unearned. And next, and what is culture? Culture is that integrated pattern of human behavior that includes your thoughts, communications, languages, practices, beliefs, etc. That the totality of who you are and who you are as a member of a community. And these impact our work and how we communicate with people. Next, please. And I just wanted to talk about, there's a difference between cultural competence and cultural humility. Competence is a type of social fluency gained by learning about another's culture, a cultural language, set of customs, beliefs, and patterns. It enables service providers like peers to tailor their approach to be culturally responsive and sensitive. Cultural humility is an approach to socio-cultural differences that is self first. It emphasizes intersectionality and understanding one's own implicit biases. This approach cultivates self-awareness and self-reflection, bringing a respectful willingness to learn to interpersonal interactions. Next, please. Considering cultural customs and beliefs. Here are just a few examples, and I'll wrap up quickly, Andrea. Some health beliefs that our cultural background and our upbringing might mean that we have different ideas about our health care. And the customs that we have in our families, and the different roles of women and men, and that might impact when you're able to meet with people or where you're able to meet with people. Next, please. Ways to resolve these barriers. We can provide mobile and community support in local areas rather than making people come to a central place. We can ensure that our support staff have the training to be culturally responsive and diverse. We can ensure that we have language diversity on our team, and we can refer to both traditional and alternative resources. We can include families in support services, expand our hours, and collaborate with our partners to create safety nets so people always have a door to check if they have somebody to check with if their recovery organization isn't available. Next, please. And the importance of self-care. This is a huge part of supervision, is really watching out for the welfare of your peer recovery team, because we work with vulnerable folks who have complex needs. We run into barriers all the time. We have heartbreak. We see a lot of successes, and all of those peaks and valleys can really take their toll. So I provide here, and we'll provide after the session, it's a quality of life scale that you can use to monitor your own status and then talk to your supervisor about how you're doing in all of these areas. And I believe that's the end. Is that right? Thank you. That was a lot. I overestimated a little bit, and there's some sources for you to have as well, and glad to answer any questions or hear your ideas.
Thank you, Susie. This has been great. And I think we already have Esteban who has a question.
Okay.
Oh, that was just a reaction and clapping.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, I see.
Someone talking? Is that
Probably someone who had her mic unmuted.
okay?
I'm giving you all some times to make questions, comments, or give us your impression after this didactics.
Well, I hope that means you all have wonderful supervision and you're wonderful supervisors. I'm sure you are. And I'm sure we all appreciate the complexity and urgency of our work. And I hope it was somewhat helpful for you today.
And besides the material, the PowerPoints that we're using for the didactics, there's a couple of supporting materials that Susie provided that are great and very useful that will be sent to all of you in an email after this class. Just to let you all know.
I just wanted to chime in and say, Susie, that was fantastic. There was a lot of information there to unpack, but I really appreciate it. And I think one of the things that the one that I'll speak to real quick and that stood out to me was the difference between cultural competency and cultural humility. I think as peers, I think it really is important that we embrace the culture of humility piece far more, even though we talk about the cultural competence. So thank you so much for bringing that together.
Thank you, Richard.
This is Coach D, and I have a question. So I seen some familiar um language, what I have a question in is, so I'm a CEU provider. So this ethical information would it be okay to pull this because you're in another state and still use it here in Texas?
I think the ethical guidelines that we all follow in this kind of work, you might have very specific things in your state or your area that are additional or unique, but I think these are generally accepted concepts about ethics and boundaries that are good, solid practices to protect yourself and others. Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and being in Texas, I would say that absolutely 100% of what Susie's presented, we can use in our, yeah, it was really well done.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your attention.
No, thank you for a great presentation. If we don't have any specific questions for this didactics, that is okay. We can briefly go to our announcements. And then, as I always say, when we move to the case, we may want to revisit some of the material of the didactics. And just want to remind all of you that to receive your CEU credits, you must first complete your post-session survey link. We'll send that to you in an email after this class. So make sure that you answer yes on the question, are you applying for CEU credit for today's session? Once you answer that question, once you answer that survey, please give it approximately 2 weeks and we'll send you your certificates via email. Next. We're always looking for case presenters. As you know, our echo sessions are case-based learning experience. We want to hear from real scenarios and real cases. So if you want to share any of your cases with us, past or present, just send us an email at cstat@utesca.edu and we'll provide a form. It's very easy. Next. And we want to announce that on March 2 and 3, 2026, we'll be again at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. Please be on the lookout for more information, but it's confirmed. So save the date, March the 2nd and 3rd, 2026. Science Matters, that's our annual convention that you're all familiar with. So we're very excited to announce it, and please let us know if you have any questions. You can always use the link that we're sharing with you in the chat. Thank you. Next. And we're having on July 18, Influence in Action, Navigating the Fast Pace of Policy and Funding Shifts. Very timely, very appropriate topic for many of us on this times. So we invite you to attend. It's a live webinar, free. We're going to be distributing CEUs. It's with John Comola, the founder and CEO of the Wire River Group. For more information, you may send us an email, go to our webpage, or we're sharing with you the link on the chat. Thank you. Next. And of course, we'll meet you here on Wednesday, July 23rd for our next session of Recovery Support Services. And I think that now we can, Christine, if you are ready, if you could briefly walk us through the case. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay to give a little bit of a backstory? This kind of starts like where she's at now.
Can take approximately 4 or 5 minutes, just giving us the most important aspects of the case. And if you
Okay.
want to, you can use the case form as a guide.
Okay. All right. So I have a 35-year-old African-American female. She just completed a treatment program. She did inpatient treatment for about 3 weeks. And she success looks like maintaining her sobriety, of course, getting a job, getting back custody of her children, and she's very interested in becoming a behavioral health technician. The obstacles that she is facing, she came straight back to the neighborhood that she left from. So she knows a lot of people around here. My biggest concern is that she can easily fall back into what she just came out of. Her recovery capital, we've been working with her for a while. We got her ID and documents so she can start a job search. She's very social, good communicator, great personality, big people person. She does have the support of her family right now. She is looking, her drug of choice is meth. For her living situation, she can stay there if she's going to meetings, getting a job and doing the things that she needs to do. So we're going to be working on that. The plan would be ideal to have some kind of aftercare treatment. Well, it would have been great to have a resource for aftercare treatment before she came back here. I feel like that's what we're missing, and that I've already expressed that's my biggest concern, her coming back here too soon. She was gone 3 weeks. She excels when she's sober, very, very bright young woman. But I'm afraid that her coming back so soon could definitely be a hindrance. And that's about it as far as the case.
Thank you, Christina. So, questions from our group or suggestions?
Christina, can you hear me?
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
You mentioned she wanted to be a behavioral health technician, right?
Yes.
I can tell you that as somebody who used to manage one, that most facilities usually wait for they hit a year mark. They won't ask it, they're not required to, but just with the nature of our community and our organizations, people either gonna know or tell, or not tell like tattletale, but like they're gonna be able to evaluate. So if she's trying to do that, it almost seems like she has to find a more I mean it's doable because there's lots of us who have and will. It is very difficult. I mean, I don't want to sound like the dream's dead, but I guess it's just to encourage her to, and maybe that'll become an incentive for her to kind of keep it going too. Because most places, if I'm being honest, whether it's written or not, I'm not going to look at someone with early recovery beyond a year. And anyone can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. Yeah, even with the recovery support positions, you have to have a year's sobriety. They would like to see that. So yeah, that's definitely, but hopefully that will give her hope to and encouragement to stick with this, you know, if that's her goal. In the meanwhile, we can definitely encourage her to get a job and save up money, get transportation and things of that nature, with that being the long-term goal, you know.
Richard,
Yeah, no, great case. I was just curious about a couple of things. One is, so she was in a residential treatment setting, is that right? Was that in the community or was that away from the community? Then she just returned here, or what is
Yes.
that? Yeah,
She went to Texas Recovery Center. She went out to the ranch,
okay.
and did
Yeah.
really well there.
And then I guess I had the same question. I see where Lindsay had asked, is she should expressed any interest in aftercare or an outpatient?
She didn't, but in all honesty, I would love any resources that y'all have in regards to aftercare, just so that I can present that as an option before they go into treatment. This
Mhm.
was kind of a last minute thing. I saw that she had just had a baby and she was doing great. And then I saw that she relapsed and offered her treatment, and it just kind of happened so fast that we just wanted to get her, you know, better for the moment. But for future references and future cases, I would love resources of aftercare facilities to where we can plan that out and, you know, ahead of time and kind of avoid, you know, coming to this place.
Yeah. You know, the other question has Hannah has hands up too. So do you have aftercare options? I know Palestine's not a really large community, so I didn't know what resources you might have close by, or what is the closest options for you?
Closest options would be Smith County, Tyler, Dallas, you know, surrounding bigger towns.
Okay.
We have absolutely not much to choose from here. We don't have any kind of facilities that people can come to unless they've been formerly incarcerated or meet other requirements of that nature.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Cynthia Serrato, would you like to mute yourself and expand a little bit more on your question on the chat? Thank you.
I think it was the same question that Richard just was asking, you know, to get a better understanding of what outpatient services were available. Because it sounds like that would be the ideal situation to help support her in her sobriety and recovery through this process, and connect her and build her recovery capital with a sober community. My experience coming from supervision is that many of the vendors that offer services to our clients that are under supervision also offer self-pay options or offer options to non-clientele, probation clients. So that might be an option to explore if there's something in the community, some providers that might be willing to accept her and offer services to her. That is a not traditional referral, right? But that's my experience. Of course, I'm in a very resource-rich community in Travis County, so
right.
Travis.
yes. So that's my
Yeah.
experience, and it's a very different experience than what would be Palestine.
Yeah, we really don't have a whole lot to choose from around here. We have to outsource them to the bigger cities. And as far as like recovery related community, that's, you know, we have our faith-based programs, recovery groups, stuff of that nature. But I see that a lot of us that maintain that and keep going, you know, we have been successful in our recovery. So that's something that I'm trying to encourage her with. But we'll see if she shows up today. I may have to go find her.
We're going to go with Kenneth, then with Jody, and then with Dr. Hernandez. Kenneth, please go ahead.
So if I'm not mistaken, Access in Jacksonville has substance abuse counseling. I think they also provide outpatient resources as well. That's in Jacksonville.
And we have one here in Anderson County as well. I work very
Okay.
closely with Access,
Okay.
so I'll reach out to Donna Faulkner and see if she can help out.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. Jody Bayless.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was thinking that somebody that she has established a relationship with, whether it be a coach or counselor or therapist, whatever, but just have like a daily check-in with and not set up, not that she expects it, every day we're going to do this, and just day at the very beginning when she's first back into her home, for a few days every day, but just like a daily check-in and just real general MI. How's it going? Did you have any challenges today? Did you have any successes? And then encouragement, like a 5-minute thing, right? And then do that for a few days in a row, and then just kind of space it out, maybe every 2 or 3 days, and then every once in a while, just to let her know that she needs to be thinking and on top, not just let things happen. That she needs to have a life of that she can make the right choices, and she has the power to do that. So to validate her decision making, but at the same time kind of guide her and support her intensely at the beginning, but just kind of let her go as the days go on, and just let her know somebody is still supporting her, and she's accountability partner or whatever.
Absolutely. Yes.
That.
Thank you.
Dr. Hernandez.
Thank you for that thorough presentation, Christina. I have a couple of recommendations. They're in the line of what you are already doing. You speak about her in relationship to 2 domains of recovery proposed by SAMHSA. That is community and purpose. When she is saying out loud, I want to be a part of this, I want to do this type of work, that is her saying in her own words, purpose, right? Looking for purpose and giving back to community.
Right.
I don't think that I hear you on the piece that some places will employ people, but what I would like to recommend is that you think about other ways that she can develop purpose. She can volunteer at a place. She can shadow people who are doing the work. She can, right, through her own pathway of recovery, she can engage with people who are doing this work. You can match her with a mentor who's going to talk to her about that. And there are, in many places, no requirements for attending training. So some of these trainings are available, right? She could use the support to attend some of those training as an introduction to the field. That way, the feeling of developing purpose is being attended to, and she's doing some preparation. That's one. Number 2, I would say, and I remember when I had that, I want to give back piece, but I don't know how to do it. So I reached out to some people who did. And then the other piece that you're talking about is community. In this case, the opposite of addiction is not recovery, it is connection. But how do we help people connect to community in many different ways, right? And through her pathway of recovery, whatever that one is, I know that there's a lot of talk in the chat about aftercare and outpatient and all of that. Through a pathway of recovery, she can continue to connect with folks who are going to be supportive. And in that way, you build a recovery community of your choosing and of your identification. So I would recommend that and couch them in those 2 domains of recovery, the other ones being health and home, right? That are extremely important as well. But I'm extremely excited that you're thinking about those 2 areas with for her.
Absolutely. And, I hadn't thought about it, but she can come and volunteer here and give back in some ways. So that would be perfect. And then I can, mentor her on a more personal level. So that's great. Thank you.
Demetra.
Okay. Great scenario, well, not scenario, presentation, but this is what I want to just say, that dignity of risk is a core principle. So she has a right to have a return to use, and her getting her life where she wanted to be. It may not come through you, Christina. It may come through may come through somebody else. I've had peers that had returned to use, and when I did re-engage with them, it wasn't to coerce them into what I think they should be doing. It was just to encourage them, ask them what it is they would like to do next. You know, it was just to encourage them, let them know I was still here with them, you know, and just see how things was going with them. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
and so I would encourage you just to do that. Now what I did not go out and do is find them. You
Yeah,
know,
well, I went and picked her up from her mom's yesterday. We have a very, very tight relationship here. Like, there's not a
yeah,
whole lot of support here, so yeah, I'll do
yeah,
whatever's necessary to
okay.
help make sure she's successful.
Yep, because with dignity of risk, now she see what's not going to work. You know,
Right.
so sometimes we have to fail forward.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it takes a couple failures to know what we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Dr. Hernandez, do you want to say a little bit more about what you just posted on the chat?
Yeah, this goes nicely with what was just said by Dimitra, right? We know that there are harm strategies that many of us who are in recovery use all the time, and many times people feel that, you know, by introducing language around harm reduction and strategies that work with substance use or making excuses for people, nothing could be further from the truth. We want to keep people alive. We know that in terms of recurrence, 60 to 65% of people data show have a return to user signs and symptoms, and to review harm reduction strategies with her and with everybody that we work with, not just with her, are important things to do, right? With the right type of language and those sorts of things, it can go a long way. And with the right types of supports, because the reality on the ground is the reality on the ground. I remember going back from treatment into my community and being really scared and really at elevated risk. Yet, you know, the folks who were around me, you know, they taught me some techniques of how to deal with certain things and certain issues, family pressure, peer pressure by other folks, just all the stuff that comes up. So I really believe in army strategies that are connected to wellness and recovery. And when done well, you know, you can get access to the right tools.
Lindsay, do you want to unmute and extend a little bit more? You're talking about how success should look for her and not for the peer in this case. Do you want
Yeah,
to speak a little bit
that's
more about that?
so one of the things that I definitely have had to do more than once is like really sit down and discuss with a person what success looks like for me, you know, what my idea of success is for them, and then what their ideas of success is, because it really like it has, you know, not always been the same, and that can be, you know, something that I have to reevaluate in myself to realize that what they want and their idea of success is what matters, right? Mine does not. So really being able to identify the differences in those two things is crucial for me to be able to work with somebody in the way they want to be worked with.
Right. And my response to that is what success looks like for her, to me, is her being successful in what she's wanting to do, her setting goals and reaching them and working towards them. I'm just here to encourage her and support her in any way that I can. I, you know, give her options, and if that's what she wants to do, make it happen. You know, as far as you know, my idea of recovery and success, it looks different for everybody, and everybody that I work with is on a different level. So what they want to do and the goals that they want to achieve, that's my idea of success for them. You know, I leave my success is completely different. You know, I've got a lot longer in sobriety, so I'm not trying to compare the two at all.
Thank you, Christina. And also I wanted to ask, because it looks like part of how she sees herself succeeding is regaining custody of
Yeah.
her children. Did you see that like an important motivator for her? Is that something that we can leverage and help her go to where she wants to go?
Yes, absolutely. And that's that's probably why she took the step to go to treatment, because she has 5 children already and just had a baby recently before, all this happened, and she had went to treatment. And I mean, she's got beautiful children. Her mom's taking care of them. She wasn't allowed to stay at mom's house while she was in her addiction, and now she's able to be there with her kids. And I mean, yeah, that's the ultimate goal, is to be a family again, and at least be able to be a part of their lives, not just someone who comes in and, gets what she needs for the moment and then leaves with the baby screaming. I'm sure that breaks her heart. It broke my heart seeing that, so that's definitely something that is driving her to do better.
Is something that any of our hosts would like to say related to that, to her relationship with her children and that situation, the right for her to be with the child related to her substance use.
Yeah, I guess that's a touchy subject, pretty emotional.
Yeah, I just simply introduced the idea because I thought it was such an important component.
Yeah,
And,
it
and
really
most
is.
likely, and you're confirming to me that it is important
Absolutely.
motivator for a person. Richard.
Yeah, one of the questions I had earlier, just had to do, and I think you touched on it, and she's with her family. Is her family a safe place to be? Or sometimes returning from a treatment center, going back to your family, is not always the best option
Yeah.
because it may not be a healthy environment, but it sounds like that is a healthy environment. And then I was just going to kind of go another direction, knowing that you work at Hope Station in Palestine or whatever, and that's a faith-based group.
Yes.
If that's an option for her in a community, sometimes being involved with a faith-based organization or group could be a resource for her when you start talking about reconnecting to the community, if that's a pathway that she embraces. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And she does come in as a client, but I would like to bring her in on the other side, and, have her come in and just volunteer so that she feels like she's working towards something now that, Hernandez, said that. I wasn't even thinking about that. But yeah, that'll definitely help, build some confidence and some purpose, and maybe help keep her on the right track.
Good.
I actually caught her out ministering to somebody yesterday about the Texas Recovery Center. So it was really cool. Yeah, it was really beautiful to see. So
we're going to go to Lindsay very briefly, and then we're going to move to Dr. Hernandez to see if he could give us a summary of today's case and the recommendations. Lindsay.
Yeah, so I worked with quite a few families that were involved with CPS, and for me, it was helpful to ask them if they wanted me to go with them, to advocate with them, and to also sometimes like to help them understand everything that's needed and required of them and things like that. So that's always an option too.
right. And I really need to sit down and talk to her about what the circumstances are. I'm not sure if the rights have been terminated altogether, or, so really need to find out more information on that to see how to proceed, but at least she is able to be in the kid's life for right now. So.
Thank you. Dr. Hernandez, would you give us a brief summary and some of the recommendations? Some of them you yourself already provided, but if you can review them before we close. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you once again. Thank you for the presentation, Christina and Susan. Thank you for the didactic, because I think that there's a number of things that connect here nicely between the two. Um, uh, in terms of the cultural elements, right, and connecting here what Susan talked about as it relates to the culture of human beings, and how do we tap into the cultural elements that are important to them, and how do we include them in engaging with folks, that becomes a really, really important thing. I had put earlier into the chat a couple of resources as it relates to bias and implicit bias that Susan talked about. And when we're working with people like the case that you presented, Christina, and with anybody, it's important for us as providers to look inward. So I recommend the National Center on Cultural Competency, the assessment tools. You'll see the link in the chat. And I recommend the Implicit Bias Project at Harvard. And those things take about 45 minutes to do. And this look inward that helps us with cultural humility, which is a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique and redressing power imbalances in the dynamic that we have with the people that we serve. Coming back to Christina, we know, you know, that there are power imbalances, right? She's at her most vulnerable. We are people with information, with data, with resources. And so how do we, right, redress some of those power imbalances? And in that recommend in her desire and articulation to build community and purpose by way of doing this work, there's opportunities there, right? As you said, Christina, light bulb went off in your head in saying, you know, I can have her volunteer here, right? I can have her shadow some of the stuff here. Can also send her to some training, right? And introduce her to what the field looks like in a more practical way, right?
Right.
And in doing so, we explore further her goals for being able to do that, right? Um, the other piece that we didn't talk a great deal about is what is her pathway of recovery, of her choosing. This is connected to self-determination, to choice and agency, right? And so the best way of building community as it relates to recovery is to connect that building of community to recovery pathway. You know, as an example, if someone's pathway is 12-step, obviously there is where they're going to most build community. If it's through a faith-based pathway, then it's there that they're going to connect to their pathway and to the people who practice that pathway. If it's smart recovery, rational recovery, whatever the pathway is to connect the building of community through that pathway initially, right? Because my pathway is very eclectic. So I belong to many different communities. She is African American. Connecting that to culture, I am sure that she is going to want to connect with people who are also African American. And by that, I am not implying that she would not connect with other folks as well, right? But it's important to connect that. And then to the piece that Andrea said about her kids, that is connected to purpose. When your kids are removed, and I'm sure that most people know this here, there's a lot of shame and guilt. Listen, when people say substance use and mental health can affect everybody, I agree with that. But the other piece that we forget is that it impacts people in different ways. And so men are not socialized to take care of their kids in this society. It is women who are socialized to bear the brunt of taking care of their kids. And when something happens, like with substance use disorders, the shame and guilt that comes with that is huge. And so there's a lot that we can and should do to alleviate some of that shame and guilt, right? In terms of coming back to the reasons and the processes as to why those happened, right? And then helping her to deal with language and approaches that are going to help her connect to her kids and to her family. And you did say nicely that she's connected to family. So for me, all of those things are in play, right? And I would say this as one of my final things here. When I returned from prison to treatment and then to my family, people wanted to throw me a party because they thought that I was cured. And so I needed an entry strategy into my family, but I also needed a series of exit strategies when I was engaged and involved with my family that were going to keep me safe. And that is related to harm reduction. It is related to, key words and key things to do because it becomes overwhelming. And to help people with this reentry back into family and into community and to enter into these spaces and places where the culture is very different. The drug using culture is very different from the recovery culture. And sometimes we believe that what we're selling is the next best thing to sliced bread, which it is, recovery. But for many of our people, it clashes because those principles and those cultural elements can look very different. So I would recommend, right, exploring that as well in terms of those values, ways of doing things that can help us help people in very organic and practical ways. In organic and practical ways. And I'll end with this, Christine. Thank you for the work that you're doing, for being so practical in terms of doing that, and for you articulating multiple times. I heard you saying it multiple times. My success, my measures for my success are very different from hers, and it's very different from all of us, right? And so it is, how do we, as you said, engage with her so that she articulates what's important for her, and let's work on that, right? So thank you very much for listening and for all the work that you're doing on the ground, for sure.
Thank you.
Great way of closing this session, Dr. Hernandez. Thank you again, Christina Humphrey and Susie Walker, for a great didactic presentation. Please don't forget to answer our post-session survey right after the class, and we'll see you next month. Thank you to all. Have a great
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.
You too.